Hey everybody, it's Chair, and today we are going to be listening and reviewing the Andy Williams album, Day of Wine and Roses. Now this is definitely a switch up for the previous 5 albums we've listened to, but it's in my collection nonetheless, and of course we rank it in 3 categories as always: the context of the creation of the album, the songs and track lists themselves, and finally the album cover, of course. For context, I will say this album has a really fun fact, and it's the reason I bought this album, is before August of 1963, the Billboard 200, or what we know as the Billboard 200, was originally separate lists of stereo and mono mixes, which is kind of an interesting, historical thing about music, of when they started combining that. And in August of 1963, they combined the list into one list, and the first ever album to top the Billboard 200 was this album. Now, this was the 11th studio album by Andy Williams, and he played many of the songs on this album on his television program that he also hosted at the time, as well as other concerts and venues he would perform at. So this is obviously a compilation album of sorts, as it's more just songs he wanted to record, but they're mostly pop covers that he took from everywhere else. I would say the only song that was like his was the final song on this album, which he would sing and put on his TV broadcast that he would close the show with. Once again, the context on the songs and the creation of the album is very, very minimal, if not any. Once again, they were just pop covers that he was shooting at the time, so he just put them all together on an album. However, I will say it's pretty cool to see, how musicians were treated back in the 60s. They were extremely over-marketized with TV show programming, vinyls, and live performances all running at the same time in their business. And it's not like we don't see that nowadays, but for these musicians, it was recording these albums like every 6 months, 2 or 3 albums a year for these musicians. So because of that very minimal context, I would give this category a 2 out of 5, nothing too fascinating, just a musician doing his job basically. The songs themselves are decent, but it's nothing that would shock you if you were expecting to listen to that crooner 50s and 60s tunes. Once again, still all covers, so nothing new or experimental from him. I only like 2 of the 12 tracks. I don't really care for too many songs. I do like Falling in Love with Love, which I believe is the opener, and What Kind of Fool Am I is also a pretty good song, but everything else I really could rather just put in the background music of when I'm doing other things around the house. So the final score for the song category is a measly 0.83 out of 5, which is by far the worst we've seen so far on this show. Once again, I said that this record was more for historical collection, not necessarily tunes I really want to turn on regularly. Now, in the final category, that is of course the album cover. Now at the time, 50s and 60s, these was very generic for most album covers. It was just usually the performer and the songs listed on it that you were going to hear. Nothing super out of the blue. I can't hold too much against it because it did what that format of creating album covers were at the time, but it doesn't mean I'm going to give it too much slight there, so I'll give it a 1.5 out of 5 in this category. That means the final score for this album I have made is 4.3 out of 15, which is easily the bottom of our ranking so far, 6 episodes in. And that does make a lot of sense to me, as I kind of knew going into this episode. This is more for the importance of what this meant in music history or music ranking history, and I gotta give it that. I also will say I have a fun challenge I'm doing with my cousin. Him and I are listening to every Billboard album that went number 1 on the top 200 in history. So when we started this challenge, this was the first ever album we listened to. So it kind of has that impact on me as more of a memory, less than actually the music inside of it, but it's still a good album if you want to tune into it. Of course, Andy Williams, nothing against him, big celebrity, and he's made great Christmas songs. But if you do want to get into him, if you're into the 50s, 60s jazz, like pop hits, you would love this. I'm not advising against it. This is just purely my opinion. I also like to see that at this time this is what popular music was, and this was just a few short months before the Beatles took over the world and revolutionized what popular music is, maybe even still today. But tune in next time as we review the Barbra Streisand album People, another vocalist we'll be looking at on our next episode. But of course, if If you like this stuff and other stuff on the channel that comes out, like, comment, subscribe. Tune into all the creators' work here. Kai, Leon, and Jackie Claire, much love. And yeah, I'll see you guys around.